Hey everybody, Dave Chlystek here, the Story Whisperer. And we're here with another exciting installment of the Story Artist Academy. I have a very special guest this evening. First off, I want to introduce Dave Schwartz, my esteemed co-host on this. He is, if you don't know who he is, you can IMDb him. But he's worked on just about everything, right, Dave? Pretty much.
Everything, including a couple freeways, but that was community service, and I had it was just a short.
Yeah. We all have criminal. We all have to expunge his record, so it's okay. So, do you want to introduce our special guest that you have lined up for us this evening?
Yes.
All right.
So these are two people that I've known for a really, really long time. We met doing Hard Time at Disney, out in the yard. We swapped cigarettes, and we planned our escape together. So up there in the upper left-hand box there, next to Joan Rivers and right above Paul Lynde, is Dev Ross, and Dev and I we had an interesting meeting in like the first couple of weeks of me getting landing at Disney, and I had to set her straight on some things. So, and we'll talk about that. And then right
therapy over it.
Well, hold on, Dev. So, Dev, do you want to tell us what you do? I don't think Dave exactly just said that. But I would like to know myself. What you're a writer, correct?
Yes.
Very nice. So awesome.
Yes.
Tonight, I'm kidding, Dave. Tonight we're going to talk about the fine craft of writing. And actually, Dave and I, this is part one of, I don't know how many parts this is going to be, but we're kind of delving into an actual production and the process and the thinking that goes into it. And of course, the very first thing is writing the scripts and coming up with character development. So we thought we would have a couple of esteemed writers on to talk about that.
And
so
since
go
we
ahead,
couldn't
Dave.
get any, we decided to get Dev and Kevin to kind of fill that.
All right.
What can I tell you? So in the box right below Dev is Kevin Hops, who is another writer that I met at Disney, and Kevin has quite an interesting background in writing and his pathway to glory in animation. So we can talk about that. Since I did a couple of these shows with Dave, and we kind of talked about it, and we wound up getting a lot of requests just to get with a lot of questions about what the process is, how do we put together one of these things, and where it all begins, and once a lot of money has exchanged hands, we get into the process of making a show. And so Dave and I thought that what we do is we do a series of shows just to kind of walk through the process, kind of in the order that it happens, and give those people who are not in animation or don't know how it works the experience of going through one of these things. Dev, why don't we start with you? Why don't we find out a little bit about how the heck did you wind up in animation? What crime you did?
By playing softball.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, gosh, it sounds like there's a story there.
I started off as a performer, and I was an equity actress, and I did a lot of stage, and I toured all over the United States, and then I guess I kind of hit a wall as an actress. You push a certain age, and you just don't get hired anymore. And so I started. My husband at that time he had several previous wives. Anyways, one of them had been a movie star.
Not that that's a bad thing.
Oh, David, yeah, absolutely.
The most creative ones usually do.
What are we getting here? I mean, because we can dig in, Anyways, she she was she wasn't working so much as an actress anymore, but she was working a lot as a writer. And so she had more jobs than she could handle. And she's passed away now, God bless her. And so I can tell this story freely. I was ghostwriting her scripts.
Cool.
And I was, not real cool, but I was desperate and pregnant and playing softball on this actors team, the Hollywood actors, we had softball.
Mhm.
And somebody came up to me and said, one of the ladies, and Julia Leewald, by the way, played on that team, Kevin. And that's how I met Julia, and that's how I got Julia into Disney at that time. So it tracks back. But so anyways, I had written all these scripts for her, ghostwritten. And one of the ladies on the team said, hey, I'm working for this animation agent, and he's just in the biz and he needs writers. Does anybody write animation? And I do. And so it's a horrible thing that I did. I took Deborah's last name to go unnamed off the script that I had ghostwritten. I put my name on it. She took it to the agent. He signed me. 2-3 weeks later, I'm at Disney, waddling in, very pregnant. I pitched and they said, have your baby come back. And that's how it happened. And I literally did not know that really what I was doing, other than, thank God, Carl Gears thought I was very creative and that I could be taught. And that's how it happened. It happened because I lied. I mean, I put my name on a script that I really wrote, but I shouldn't have. And I don't think anybody should follow my example. But, you see a door open, you got to jump through it. And I did.
Sure. Yeah. Carl Gears, what was he a writer on at that time?
He was story editing Winnie the Pooh. And that's what I got hired on. But that's interesting. Anyway, so that's, and yeah.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Yeah.
So the first 2 weeks at Disney, I lost about 17 pounds because I barely knew what I was doing. Bruce Talkington, dear deceased Bruce Talkington, and he helped me through it, and that's how it happened. But I thank God somebody recognized that I had some talent. So, and that was Carl.
So, and just out of curiosity, how long had you been in Disney before I got there? I just kind of curious to know what the time frame was.
Was I pregnant?
I don't remember.
I think I was there probably a year. I don't know.
Because I got there in '88.
Oh yeah. I had been there about a year and a half then.
Okay. Well, then you should have known better. I shouldn't have had to come to your office and yell at you. Okay. Kevin.
Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
Good, sir.
Good. Much better story than I did. Much cooler.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into animation and writing?
So it started in my cave. I used to just do the drawings on the wall, and then finally, So actually,
I love your dinosaur series. That's really great.
Yeah, I worked.
I like the Fire series personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was stage 2.
Yeah.
I think it was the Fire series that got you into Disney.
Could have been.
Yeah.
That's what got me into Disney. So.
That's a cool story. Come on, Kevin.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm talking over you. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think you might have a better story. I don't know.
No, I don't think
so. I've already heard mine. So I guess in animation. Well, first I wrote sitcoms. So I wrote sitcoms for a while, and then there was a big writer's strike, and so I thought, well, what else? I'm a writer. What do you do? What can I do? So I thought I'll try selling cars. So I got a job selling cars. So I was selling cars, and surprisingly, I ended up at some place that just we'd sell out of our cars, and I actually made a ton of money and forgot about writing. And bought a house and, got married, all sorts of stuff, and forgot about it. And then one day this producer came in from, he produced the Jeffersons or whatever. And he came in and he said, what are you doing here? And I saw the cards and goes, well, I know this guy who's looking for a writer. He's working on a show called The Smurfs. You should talk to him. So that was at Hanna-Barbera. So I went and I talked to the guy, pitched some stories. He had me write a script and I did. And he said, look, we're wrapping up our season, but when we come back, which we're planning on doing, we would like you on staff. And I said, okay, fine. And I went back to selling cars because I didn't know, maybe. And then I got a call and they said, okay, we're back. You want to start? So then I started, this is the late 80s, at Hanna-Barbera, worked Smurfs. Then Disney I knew some people that worked there that went to Disney and they kept saying, you should come over here. You should come over here. So, I wrote on Smurfs and then I got promoted to be story editor. That's a funny story, actually. A story editor. So you're writer first, and then you go to the next step is story editor, and then possibly producer. I didn't want a story edit. I like being a writer, and they asked me to be a story editor at Hanna-Barbera, and I said, no, I really don't want to. They said, well, you have to. And I said, what, you're gonna fire me because I don't want to do it? And the lawyer said, well, wait, never, I didn't have an agent. And so they said, well, wait, let me talk. And the next day they said, okay, look, you can, if you want to be a writer, you can be a writer. But what if we give you this much money to be a story editor? And I said, no, I just don't want to be a story editor. I don't want to. And so I was writing. One day I went into the bathroom and I'm at the urinal. Sorry.
Where all big deals are made.
Yes,
right.
And the head lawyer,
golf course.
And the head lawyer for Hanna-Barbera came in and he's at the next stall and he says, so what's it going to take to make a deal with you? And I just said, because I'm in the bathroom, I don't think he's making a deal. So I just said some crazy number and he goes, okay, fine. So then we're washing our hands. I want you to know I washed my hands. And then he took me and dragged me down to Bill Hanna's office and said, okay, we made the deal. And I was thrown at a meeting and then I was a story editor there. So that's how deals in Hollywood are really made.
So basically, he gave you the equivalent of what will it take to get you in this car and off the lot today?
That's right.
There you go. See? So it all comes back to selling cars.
Now, not everybody here may know what a story editor does. Can you describe it a little bit?
I don't even know if I do. So a story editor, yeah, so it's a little different, because they have story editors in live action, and then they have, editors in books and stuff. I think as a story editor in animation is more hands-on. In other words, so I do both. Sometimes I story edit, sometimes I just am a writer. And it's fine with, I like that actually. I prefer being a writer. But when you're working as a freelance writer, you're working for the editor. It's not like that, like if you wrote a book that the editor is going to help you with your book. It's like, no, you're writing for that. So you're giving him hopefully as close as you can get it to what he wants, but then he's going to rewrite you, or he's going to give you notes to tell you to get it closer and closer, but eventually he'll do it. So sometimes when I work on stories as a story editor, I might edit 80% of it or more. Sometimes the people I've worked with for a while, I might have to do just a slight edit because they've got to know the show for a while or whatever. So you're in charge. You have like I don't want to stable, it sounds bad, but a stable of writers,
Isn't he stable once?
Yeah. So
Staff,
hopefully you have your staff of writers. Yeah. Nowadays, mostly freelance, but yeah, you have your writers, and I like to use the same writers to do multiple scripts for me. The trend now, I don't know why, but trend now seems to be like you have a 20 episode show, you probably have 15 writers. I don't know. Like a lot of shows just want one writer per episode. I think that's I like to give everybody a chance to do like maybe 3 episodes.
That's interesting because I was on a series recently. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Am I allowed to say it? Can I say what I'm on? What I was on?
We were going to put this on
I was working.
YouTube. I can always.
I was
edit.
working. We did the new season of the Care Bears, sort of a reinvention, and there was just 3 of us.
Yeah.
And
That's the better way to do it.
and I have to, Carl Gears was my story editor, but it was Carter and Carl and I, and then we got it really going for the first 10, 12 episodes, and then they brought in 2 other writers, and I can't even remember, did we do 26 or 52? I can't remember, but what happened is that, in the last, I would have to say last 3 or 4 series, that's been the way it is that I've done 12, 15 scripts on a show. And that's been the last, probably in the last 5 years of my experience is of doing way more scripts than I was used to. Because you got, you did 4 or 5 and then you're on to the next show. But the shows that I've been on lately, it just seems like it was like the old days, Kevin, where we're really roundtabling and working as a team and much more hands-on. And so, it was really great to be able to maturate along with the show.
Yeah, I think that's a much better way. I think what's happening.
It's a much better way. You get might be a little slower starting out, but we started between Carter and I and Carl, and then I don't really know who the other 2 writers ended up to be. We were churning them out because, we already knew each other's thoughts, and I knew what Carl was going to do. And
whose decision was it that it would just be the 3 of you? Was it Carl? Carl Gero? Because that's kind of how he wanted to work.
Yeah, I think he would get us on the phone in the early days, the 3 of us, and just chew up stories. And I mean, we just walked away with, a real good handle on what we were going to write. And I remember thinking, my God, I haven't worked this way for so long. And Kevin, you and I had that conversation years ago on Team Atlantis, remember?
I don't remember that, no, but I would believe you.
Yeah, it was a long time ago when we were working on Team Atlantis, and you were saying, God, I just wish we could just get together around a table and chew on these stories.
Well, they do that. Actually, in the last, I would say the last 10 years or so, I'm seeing more people doing breaking stories, gosh, because I worked on Lion Guard, Star Wars Rebels, we all broke stories, Young Justice, Spider-Man, we did that. The last 3 shows, a couple of shows I've been working on, Octonauts, and now a couple of shows for Netflix, we're doing all that roundtable brainstorming stuff. But I am noticing, and I think a lot of shows do that, but I am noticing a trend, at least a lot of action shows, that they'll have quite a few writers. And I think it's a bit of networking. In other words, if you hire 12 writers, when you're done with your show, you have 12 people that owe you. And a lot of these 12 writers are all story editor. A lot of times they're already working on other shows. So not even going to freelancers. So it becomes more of a game than for me, I'm lazy. I guess I'm lucky too. I don't need to network as much anymore. So I want people to write a lot of scripts so they get better and better and better and make my job easier.
So outside of maybe economical, if you're doing, let's say, a season of 13 and you've got 13 writers all writing, do you do that with the idea, okay, well, I get them all going at the same time, and then, in 6-8 weeks, I've got 13 scripts on my shelf, and I don't have to, is it any of that? Is it?
No, it depends on the show. So if you're doing a network show, especially preschool or whatever, and they're not hooked together like action, that's why in action shows you might want to do that.
Right.
But in the regular shows, you have to get network notes, and you're going to do one episode at a time and get notes and move forward. Although the last few shows I work on have been sequential shows where every show is hooked together, you know.
Right.
So we need to get a block approved. So I'll get like 10, sometimes 20 shows approved,
Uh-huh.
and then I can assign those. And yeah, they just stack up on my desk. It's like I'm always behind. So, well,
So
not behind. I'm on schedule, but it seems like I'm behind.
so then, as the editor, as the story editor, when you get that block of notes, do those stories go back to the writer, or do you just take care of it because you're the guy on staff?
Everybody does it different, you know. I've worked when I freelance. It seems like most people give you back notes. For me, it seems like a waste of time. So I just do the notes myself. So when people work for me, they do one draft, they turn it in, I got it, you know.
Kevin,
And
when you
So you say
get the blocks, when you get the blocks of, do you mean you send synopses, or are they?
well, yeah, we would come up with, myself and maybe a producer or whatever, we'd come up with a premise, say,
Mhm.
and then we'd send a block of premises, maybe 10, and they get approved or they get notes, we tweak them, and then we just assign them. Well, we would do it like Dev's saying, we'd round table them and talk with the writers and then send them off to outline like that. Nowadays we're doing it just like this, Zoom,
Zoom.
Yeah.
whatever.
So, so when you say that they do one draft, is that when you say one draft, does that include a set of notes too? You know, they turn in all right, so they come and they pitch their idea, and they come back and they got the premise, and then they give you the first draft of the script. You give them notes, they go back, they polish up. No, so it's
But that's unusual. I mean, Greg Weissman, who I also work with, this Young Justice, that's how he works, and he kind of had the same philosophy as that. It's like, it's just, by the time I read the script, make my notes, then give them the notes, then they give it back, and it's still not going to be perfect. I'm still going to have to edit it. It's like, I'll just do it, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
they turn it into me, I do it, and then I'll get notes. I'll make it as best I can, and then I'll turn it into the studio or whoever and get notes, and whatever notes they do,
Mhm.
I'll take care of. Now, I'm lucky. The last few shows I worked with have been Netflix, and they don't tend, at least for my, or maybe I'm lucky, knock on wood, I don't get a lot of notes from them. So it's basically, I just want to make, when I make my first pass, I try to make it so that I answer all their questions, so I don't have to get any notes.
Yeah.
Got a question.
I'm sorry.
So the both of you, so Kevin, you know, you kind of came from sitcom, and Dev, you've been an actress. So those experiences what's that?
I came from theater and TV.
So those experiences when you started out in writing, I mean, how did you, first of all, was it a big adjust, and how much were you able to go, oh, okay, well, all right, oh, this is like this, okay, I'll do that, you know, as opposed to really, you know, starting from, you know, ground zero, pulling out the how to write animation book and just going chapter one.
So
You know?
when I went through first piece, so I don't forget, I just want to say real quick. So some people have asked some questions I just noticed. So yes, Team Atlantis was what you meant by Atlantis. And yeah, when I rewrite somebody, they get credit. I don't like to take credit. The only reason I would ever take credit would be if I felt somebody screwed me over and turned something in that was just a piece of real garbage,
Yeah.
and they were late or something. It's never happened. So I've been given credit by somebody else, like a producer. I don't like it. And I'll tell the producer I really don't want to do it, and they have to try to persuade, well, you should get half credit. But when I story edit, no, I wouldn't allow it to happen. Now I have enough clout that I would just say, no, you can't do that or I'll quit, you know? So I don't believe in that.
Now I know a showrunner. I mean, I know of him who, because he would go in and rework every script. He would put his name on every script in the series, all 65 episodes.
That's not right. Yeah, I don't like that.
I have a question about Netflix and more. Writing for Netflix, Kevin, do you find, are you still under the same constraints as you were for network, in the sense of time constraints? And
Yeah, you know, first of all, when I'm working for network, I don't work directly for net. So I'm working for a production company who's doing a deal with Netflix. So the production that company, I kind of been talking to the producer creator of the show or whatever, or the production company, and we've already agreed. So when I turn it in, he might have a couple of things. He's usually just like, oh, maybe if she said this, and we'll just do it before it even goes out to Netflix. But then Netflix then will give notes, but they agree with they make with the production company, they come up with a schedule that I'm supposed to hit.
And when you're, I guess what I was going for more was the actual, like, is it a 22-minute? Are you still under those kind of constraints, or
I'm doing
different?
It's all, I mean, it's the same. And whether it's 11 or 22 minutes, you're going to get a schedule. And every schedule is different. I mean, right now I'm on schedule. I've worked on some shows where I'm not on schedule. The joke to me is I don't make the schedule, but I can only go so fast.
Yeah. And
so when somebody usually gives me a schedule, I don't look at it even. You know, I have a writer's assistant, and I'll just tell her, I'll just ask, when's this, when I get to each thing, I'll say, when's it due? I don't worry about the end. And I'll just say, okay, yeah, we'll get this done. You know, this one's going to be late or whatever, because it's like, whoever figures these schedules out, I have no idea how they figured them out. You know, they'll give me time, like more time in the second draft than I will in the first draft, or they'll want 6 things to come out at the same time. So I never have figured it out. I mean, fortunately, I guess they seem to be doable in the long run. But the other thing is that as a story editor, I don't have a lot of control over the schedule, really. It's like if a writer turns in a bad draft, that's going to take longer. If I get outrageous notes from the studio, that's going to take longer. If the studio doesn't give me the notes back on time, all these things happen. That's going to take longer. So basically, I just say, hey, I have my agent make it clear that I'm not going to be. They always want you to be responsible. I said I'm not going to be. I'll just do what I can do. If you don't like what I'm doing, fire me at whatever stage you feel I'm slipping up. But there's no way I'm going to say I can deliver when I'm not in control.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, but most of the time people just say, yeah, I'll do it. And then whatever happens.
The nice thing too about knowing your writers is, like, I know,
right.
Sorry, my dog came in again. The last couple of shows that I was on, it was kind of, before working with Carl, because working with Carl was great, but the last couple of shows I was on, some of the writers just really struck out. And so, you know, you juggle, and, you know, I tend to be really fast. And so I would always be, you know, hey, Dev, can you get yours, you know, in 2 weeks early? Okay. And you have to push another show ahead, right, into the schedule.
Except you can't do that now. See, on my shows or the shows that are like sequential, that's one of the benefits.
Yeah, of course.
So like that, yes, I have the same thing. A lot of times shows that would make you do second draft, sometimes if you turned in a good script, that I found one of the benefits of turning in a good script is you don't have to do a second draft, because they'll say, oh, you know what, we'll just take this. We're desperate for a script. We're just going to push this forward. Yeah. So it was almost like Pavlov's. I mean, it was like, oh, okay. That was a good incentive to turn. I mean, it should just be, you should do it anyway. But I think for me, that was a good learning incentive of like, wow, if I really knock this out of the park, I won't have to do 2 more drafts. They'll just take it. So that's what happened on those. But you can't do that. That's the bad part. If I get a bad script in, I'm stuck. I have to get that done before I can go to the next one, because they're consensual. But like when I worked on some preschool stuff, and that you can juggle if stuff comes in and out.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So Dev, what was the hardest show, the most difficult show to kind of get up to speed on? Like when we were at Disney, we kind of rolled from one show to the next show to the next show. And I know as an artist, you know, not everyone was like my cup of tea. So I kind of had to find my way into, you know, making them work cinematically.
Right.
Yeah, I was all, because I always leaned a little heavier on the comedy stuff than the action stuff. What show was it for you that maybe you had a hard time ramping up for, and how did you manage to find your way to write scripts? Because you were on staff, so you know, as soon as you were done with one, you were rolling into the next one, right?
Honestly, I think the hardest show, and you know, I feel, hold on a second.
Sure.
Hannah, hi, Hannah. My daughter just showed up from Denver. Hi. The hardest show, and it was really because it was a transition time at Disney, and the hardest show was The Little Mermaid. Only because I was just sort of floating. You know, I don't want to cast aspersions because I don't know what was going on politically or what at the time, but I was sort of, Disney was pretty empty at the time, and wasn't a lot of writers, wasn't a lot of staff around. Seemed to be going through a transition. I don't know if you were even there, Kevin, at that time.
I don't think I was.
Was this for Ted and Patsy?
Yeah, I don't want to say names, but they were very busy story editors, and they were never there. And so I'm trying to, you know, the thing is that I think it's really important when you're writing on a show is to have a lot of conversations with your story editor so that you can help them be better. I mean, they can help you be better and you help them be better, and you get a creative conversation going. And for whatever reason, and I don't remember, but they were never there. And so
did that show go multiple? I can't remember. Did it go multiple seasons?
I don't remember.
Okay, because I wrote one in the first season, and
Did you?
and the studio seemed to still be kind of bustling. You know.
Yeah. All I know is that I just sort of was kind of making it up. I mean, I ended up writing some episodes, but I never really had direction. And so I, you know, and in my head, because I started off, I was a playwright before I was writing plays before I started writing animation. And, you know, you give me too much freedom, you know, I will recreate your whole freaking show.
Yeah.
And so I was always worried because I'll cast when I write, I will cast initially a very wide net and push the envelope and see where I can go. And so that one, yeah, I felt really lost on that one. And because at that time I'd been at Disney for so long. Well, actually, I had taken a break and I had gone to Universal and I did a bunch of Land Before Time movies. I remember, Deb, I like what you're saying there about how much you want to do. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Carl. I had just gone to Universal and I had done a bunch of sequels to Land Before Time when that first started. And man, they just gave me tons of room. I mean, I got a chance to just do my thing and I felt all this freedom. But when I went back to Disney, I know how Disney can be, and I know that there's a Disney way. And so all of a sudden I'm going, okay, I'm back. I've got my uniform on. I'm ready to do the Disney way. And then I had no one really overseeing me, and I felt very lost.
Yeah.
So that was the hardest show for me because I like to, you know, I like to do good. I really do. I want to do my very best. And I didn't feel like I had an opportunity because I just didn't know what the parameters were.
Well, were you able to find a way that kind of,
what was going on? I'm sorry.
Were you able to kind of find yourself though? Like how were you able to get back on track again? Were you able to on Little Mermaid or no? No.
No,
It was just kind of...
Yeah,
So-
I ended up leaving Disney and then going back to, I did a bunch of, I ended up doing more sequels for Universal. I did Balto 2. which I won the Humanitas Award for, which was nice.
Oh, congratulations.
You get
That was
cash
really
with that.
Pardon, what?
You get cash with that.
Well, that was, I really needed it at that time. I had to buy school clothes. I remember my daughter just showed up and I told her, I called and I said, Mommy won. She goes, good, now I can finally get new school clothes. You know, that's, you know, you're a mom. So, yeah, you know, I'm really realizing that was like really unfinished business for me because I felt like I didn't do a good job. I left, I went and did some more stuff for Universal. I got interviewed for Lion Guard and I really wanted back on that show. I wanted on that show because I felt like I really had some loose ends to tie up and they rejected me.
That was a hard show.
Well, it was between two of us, and the other lady was I had worked with her on Little People, and she was actually like a zoologist or something, or a veterinarian, I don't know, but
It's always the zoologists. It
really is. Yeah,
I can't tell you how many jobs I've lost to a zoologist.
I once to an astrologer. I don't know. But,
So Dev, when you were working on Darkwing Duck, because Darkwing was kind of,
that was my baby.
yeah, it was kind of our answer to Batman, you know, in a Disney way, at least up until that point, you know. Then Gargoyles became the other,
Yeah,
you know, get us a Batman, we want a Batman, you know. So, but were you into comic books when the whole thing started? You know, how much did Tad kind of help launch you into the world of comics?
I was not into, I mean, I read comic books when I was really little. I was not into comic books. And I remember going into Tad's office and him having stacks of them. And I would like go, and I would just, you know, start reading them again. But honestly, what really helped me much more than the comic books, which I just kind of, I don't know, I just didn't really get, you know, I didn't get what that was all about. I had spent almost 10 years touring in children's theater and young audience theater and really doing some crazy characters and over the top and shtick and all of that stuff. That's what helped me write for Darkwing Duck.
Okay, interesting.
Because it was so, you know, it was so over the top and so dramatic, and the way it felt very theatrical to me. And so the comic book thing didn't really affect me. It was the theatrics, and that's what I really related to, and the action. Also, I have a big martial arts background training, and I had done stunt work. And there's all this action and great stuff and swinging and jumping, and, you know, so that was like, I was able to bring a whole different discipline with me, my time in stunt work, my time in theater.
It was really helpful because and I talk about this quite often in some of my other classes, is that a lot of times you run into writers who don't think visually. And they just like in action shows.
Our little argument,
Especially
David.
action.
Oops.
That's how we get a little argument.
But you know, when you get the scripts where the writer will say, and then they fight, and you kind of go, huh? What?
Well, I would say even worse, though, to that is when you get a sequence that the writer attempts to pose out the action, but
stage everything. Yeah, that's the other side of the spectrum.
And then
you can't please the artist. They want it one way, they want it the other way.
So I just tend to think that you know, it's always it's a process, and I do think that people that have muscle memory, so to speak. I mean, you know, I'm friends with Joaquin Dos Santos, and you know, Joaquin had, you know, he came from a martial arts background, and I always found it interesting because you could see it in his work, you could see it in the boards, like it felt authentic, like the fights had an authenticity to them that somebody who didn't have a martial arts background kind of, you know, because he knew the moves and he knew, you know, so there was just a sense of that, and that's just from the art standpoint.
Yeah.
You know, from the writing standpoint, I find that interesting though, Deb, because how did that kind of influence your work coming from martial arts?
And I think that Kevin would agree too, or he better agree, because I hope, is that everything you do as a writer informs you, go into the market, everything for a writer is an adventure, and it informs you. I also, probably the best thing that informed me as a writer is I did a tremendous amount of improv performing. I even worked with Robin Williams at the improv on Sunset. No, it wasn't the improv on Sunset Boulevard. What was it?
The Funny Bone?
The what?
The Funny Bone?
No.
Not the
Groundlings?
Not Groundlings.
There was the improv.
Second City.
The Laugh Factory or
It was run by Mitzi. She
Yeah.
was nice.
Comedy store.
Comedy
The
store.
Comedy Store. The Comedy Store.
I can't believe it. I couldn't believe it because they were all. Anyways, I worked at the Comedy Store and I did late night improv, and I was with an all-female comedy group, and having to come up with ideas on the flash. Probably that was the best training for me to jump into animation, because again, it's just so off the wall. And one of the things that, well, anyways, I don't want to sidetrack here, but all that stuff. And I would have to say that my improv work, and I still actually perform when we could perform. I have a group that still does shows. We do musicals. It just, I don't know, there's something about improv that just enlivens your mind, keeps your synapses popping, keeps your creativity going. And that was when I first had no experience, and Carl Gere goes, well, this girl doesn't know what she's doing, but she's got a great imagination. And so, he molded me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was really lucky for that.
Sure.
So did I answer the question, or did I just extrapolate?
No, that was a great answer. That's exactly what, I think that the improv part of that is awesome. That's exactly what I think. I think that most artists, coming from the artist standpoint, we've taken a lot of the better storyboard artists, I think, have come from doing some acting and improv just to kind of understand the process. And I know for myself, it really was a helpful thing to do that for that very reason. Like you're always, because you're quick on your feet. It's like you don't get hung up on something. You're able to kind of move on and move past it quickly.
Exactly. And in improv, they call it the yes and philosophy. Yes and. You never say no to an idea. And what happens a lot, especially in a network situation, production company situation, you hear a lot of no's. You get shut down, your ideas get shut down, you hear a lot of no's. But when you've come from a strong base of improv and you're always saying yes to, like I'd get a note sometimes and I'd go, oh my God, I hate that note. That's so stupid. I hate it. God, that's stupid. And then I sleep on it, I go away, and the next day I go, well, that's not so stupid. I start to yes it. It's not so stupid. And then before I know it, I'm yesing the idea, and I'm going, wow, that's brought me to a much better place than what I had before.
It's funny you say that, because it's
over.
Yeah, as an artist, that's exactly what, we'll get notes, you get your notes, and usually there's a resistance, there's a pushback to it. And usually though, those times when you just absorb it and you say, okay, what can I do with this? Those are usually the better moments of the board or the show that you get, exactly. I find.
Well, you find a way to interpret the note, but yet you kind of do it your way, so everybody gets satisfied. And 9 times out of 10, it does lift it up. It's interesting that you mentioned improv, Dev, because I actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I finished, here's a plug for, I don't even know this woman, but she wrote this book called Improv for Writers. And what's interesting about it, and the whole thrust of this, is that this kind of stuff kind of prevents you from having writer's block, because you can do yes and You can consider everything and just play it out and see where it goes. And what I find sometimes too is that when you do that kind of stuff, I mean, I don't write a lot of animation, but when I am writing screenplay stuff or that type of thing, and I do use the same technique, that I find it's in those moments when the script kind of tells you really what it wants to do, and the characters begin to talk to you and tell you which way it wants to go, and then then the hard part is letting go the idea you fell in love with to begin with, where you're and then you're trying to pound a square peg in a round hole.
And it's something that for me, I don't know, for other writers, it's something I face every time. Like I'll turn in a script and I'll go, God dang, that's a great first draft. Let them find something wrong, and every time they come back, it's just like, no, I was like, but that was my. And then and I go through my little ego thing. I always do. I go, okay, she's doing her thing. All right, stomping around, and then I let it process, and I always come back with something that surprises me.
Yeah.
And and I don't very few writers get it right the first time. You can always yes and ideas, and that's the beautiful thing about animation is that you're writing something and then it gets to a storyboard guy, director and the storyboard guy, and they're yes anding what you've done.
Yeah.
And it's really a team sport. It's really, you got to get over yourself.
You have to embrace the collaborative. I mean, because even after the storyboards, now you're dealing with layout and animation, and there's so many people that are involved in the process. And you could have the best written script, but if you get really lousy animation or a bad board that doesn't interpret your intent the way the things that you were going for, it's, no matter how great of a job you did, it's wasted. That's the most disappointing thing.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back in the day, back in our Disney days, Kevin and Deb, I don't know how much you got a chance to do this, but we would get when you turn in your rough board, the director would see it, and then it would wind up over on Tad's desk, and Tad would kind of look it over a little bit, and then sometimes it actually got to the writer to look and see if we captured the intent or whatever. So sometimes, I mean, we had, as board artists, we had a lot of set of notes, besides the director, but then Tad would give his notes, and then I know that stuff would go to maybe not the writer, but the story editor would take a look at it. And I knew that a lot of my boards that Carter Crocker got them. So this is back in the day when we had storyboard checkers that really looked at everything to make sure that what was in the script and what was on the board was the same thing. So knowing that I had that fail-safe, I started drawing scenes that I knew would never make it to animation, but I put it there just to give the writers a little zets, and I would do horrible things to Darkwing Duck in the boards on purpose. Just they'd snip out, but I usually would get a note from the writer, with a you made me spit my coffee out, or one of those things, Is it okay? I'll take it out. All right, so.
And on those rare occasions it stayed in, and that was the uncensored version of Darkwing Duck, right?
Well, one time I boarded a scene where Darkwing is falling through camera, and rather than go past the camera, I had the camera go into his mouth, into black, and then out his butthole. Yeah, that didn't make it. But the thing I was gonna say that I know that as a board artist, it's like there was a certain mandate to page count at Disney. All the scripts seem to weigh in at about 45, average about 45 pages
for a 22 minutes.
What's that?
For a 22 minute?
Oh, yeah, because
I think it was more like
it seems like the writers had to They had to talk about the idea, point where the idea was going to happen,
All
talk
right,
about
here
the
we
idea
go.
when the character
Here we
walked
go.
to do the thing, and then comment how hard it was to do it as they were walking back to the point. And because they thought the kids would, unless you just, just got a big red marker and said, "Hey kids, look at this, they're doing stuff," that they wouldn't get it. So, and then so we was jealous because those of us that very quietly tippy-toed over to Warner Brothers and freelanced over there, we always loved it because the Warner scripts were about 25, 27 pages.
Well,
they were
Sony was that way too, Dave. Sony had had a heavy page count too. Their page count was
Yes.
38 pages.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
when
yeah.
I left to go over, I remember the first script I got at Warner's was like 25 pages or something, and I'm like, "Where's the rest of it?
Where's the rest of it?
Yeah, where's the rest
Where's
of
the
this?
rest of it?
Where's Act 2?"
Yeah, well, that was a good point. Especially on shows like, Tiny Toons. Because when I worked on Tiny Toons, they had a tendency to move up into around 33 pages or so because they were very dialogue heavy and a lot of verbal gags. But working on the superhero shows, that was a place where, I think the great thing about some of the superhero shows that a lot of the guys who were writing Batman and Superman were actually guys who wrote at DC Comics.
Yeah, so they had Martin Pasco was one of the
Pasco.
Wasn't Marty a story editor? He was a story editor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Alan knows his stuff. Paul,
yeah, absolutely.
Those guys were just, guys
like Marv Wolfman or Len Wein would kind of turn up on there. And the thing is that, they knew how to write a paragraph that said, okay, Batman and Joker fight and this, and because they would just tell you what the intent is and where it needs to end. Where does it need to end up leading into the rest of the story? And then they would just leave a nice wide berth for the storyboard artist to have some fun and really stretch out and do some stuff. You just
touched on what I was going to say is intent. How important that is, and how I would imagine, as writers, Kevin, I would think, especially coming from like a show like Young Justice, where there's so much nuance, that intent has to be hit. If it's not, you could miss a lot of really important things in a show like that, for sure, from a storyboarding standpoint. I just was wondering if you wanted to touch a little bit maybe on your process for intent and, what your thoughts are about that in the process.
Well, part of it depends if it's a staff job, depends, whatever. So like Young Justice, if the producer's a writer, and they're going to follow it all the way through, that's going to get, Greg Weisman is going to look at every storyboard. So he's going to be able to he's going to be at the handouts and stuff like that. So you want to put the intent in the script, but then he can pass it through. But just to go back to the page count thing, I don't think, and I didn't realize this till later because I didn't really care. You start at Disney, they say, here's the pages that we need it to be. That's what you wrote to. And it wasn't until after I left there that I still to this day, and still some shows do it, it's like, there's no excuse not to have the right page count. How hard is it after the first script or the second script is done to say, hey, you know what? The way you guys are writing, it comes out to this many minutes. So do this many pages. Period. That's it. How hard is that? But no, for like 3, 5, 9, 8 years, whatever I was there at Disney, they were doing 35, 45 page scripts and everybody on both sides grumbling. It's like, so why didn't somebody just say, this is the page? And then what I realized later is like, you would tell writers, all right, it's so hard to cut it down to 30 pages. All right, then the board guy is going to cut 10 pages of script out of your story.
Well,
and that's why
you're
complaining later that it didn't turn out to be your story.
The board guys always felt that you writers you're being paid by the word, so you were going to really plug it up.
You guys get paid. You guys get paid by the page. We just get paid no matter what.
Fair. You're not being fair. You're not being fair. Writing for Disney is very different from other places I've worked.
Yeah.
Because in writing for Disney, for some reason, in the Disney afternoon, we were churning out shows. They were good, but they were a factory.
Yeah.
And we were directed, because I'm a new writer coming in, right? We were directed to direct, and that's where David and I got into our little tiff. He stormed into my office. Ugh. Anyways, because we were told.
It was more like a mighty wind. It wasn't a storm. It was like a mighty wind.
Up, tilt up. We were told to direct everything, and that takes a page count.
Yeah.
And I would often say, but don't doesn't the storyboard, and when they want to, they could probably, they're the artists, they could probably imagine it better than us. But the thing is that they said these guys are working fast, give them a direction. If they don't want to follow it, they don't have to. But it did up our page count. And that's when David stormed into my office on a Darkwing Duck script, really yelled at me and hurt my feelings, because he said, "Don't you think we know what to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm following directions.
And there's a reason for that too.
I'd only been there for about 2 weeks, and it was my second job, and I had the nerve to walk into our office and, with both guns blazing.
So here's the thing.
We became fast friends and like brother and sisters.
But you knew he was passionate, right? You knew he had passion. He cared.
Just like there's different kind of writers. There are some writers that will write, they just come over a hill and fight. There's different kind of storyboard artists. And I know I've been burned by ones where I say a joke and then I see the board and it's like, how is this joke possible? You're on their head. It needs to be on their feet. Where I want to say, what are you, a moron? You can't see what's supposed to do? You're sneaking into a house and it's a wide shot of people standing on the lawn with no trees around. What are you, an idiot? I mean, if I don't direct it, that's what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I was working on a show with Carl and Carter. It was we wrote the cutest damn scripts. We wanted to recreate a new Winnie the Pooh, only it was a turtle character. And when we saw those shows come back, it was vomitous. Everything was a wide shot. Everything was a wide shot. There was no nuance. There was nothing. And so, it's really hard to know what to do.
I mean, I actually at Disney, the thing that I used to get mad at, and I loved all the people I worked for there, but in hindsight, when I started to put together how it really worked, and I produced myself, and then I saw what everybody had to do, I blame a lot of times the producers. Like they would just say, tell the board artist, go see the writer. And when they come to me, I would just say, this was what your producer, who you work with and you honor and who's supposed to know an artist, told me to do. So he's just trying to throw us under the bus for what they asked for.
Yeah.
So You're on Darkwing Duck. You know who the producer of that show was. They asked for it. We gave exactly what they wanted. They wanted a certain pages. So to me, even if we're breaking the shots down, the first show that they time, they're going to go, okay, this is the right, it could be whatever length it is. They never did that. They just kept saying, it's long, it's long, it's long. It's like, well, so then change the page count. How hard is that?
Well, a couple of things. I know that the person who ran Darkwing Duck was also an artist.
Right.
And I'm not saying that this was this person's problem, but I know that, sometimes when you're coming from two different directions and you can see it.
There were two producers on that show.
Well, okay. I seem to recall one in particular. I don't know who the second one was.
Always for me, so I would hate to think who it is. They weren't always in a line.
Yes.
So that's the problem. That's the problem.
So, but the thing is that when you're coming from when you, I think when you're just dealing with words, you're really focused on the story and that type of thing. But when you've got, when you have some art behind you also, and you're seeing it a certain way, sometimes it's really hard to set that aside and not try and push the board in a way that, well, this is how I would do it, and so therefore that's the way it's going to be, rather than, well, there's a million different ways to do it, and this is one of them, and this works, so we're just going to go with this.
I think when you're a producer, like Greg and those guys that I know, they will be very much direct on the page.
Yeah.
That's how they want it. When I do it, I won't direct on the page. And then when my writers write directions on the page, I'll take it out. But instead of that, I think somebody brought this up, I will hint at the tone I want.
Yeah.
So like, in other words, I won't say it's a low shot or over shoulder shot, or, I might say POV, but short of that, I'll just say they're creeping up to a house. It's really spooky. Anything could happen, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I have to trust the director and the storyboard guys can deal with that.
Well, it also depends too on, I think there are storyboard people who they think from the point of view of filmmaking.
Right.
So they're interpreting the script as if they're directing it, which in some ways they are. They're the first draft as a director.
But cinematographer for sure.
A cinematographer, yeah, an actor, and
Sure.
gaffer, and the whole 9 yards. Then sometimes you wind up with board artists that are just okay. If the script says, and then the bad guy pulls a gun, it's just flat out this. No drama, no nothing. They are just drawing what the paper is saying,
right.
And so it's a real fine line. I get
That's
it.
Right. That's what you. I mean, it's great when you have and what's funny to me, I always thought for a long period of time, this notion of that a writer writes, they fight, is like, yeah, that's a funny joke. Nobody does that. But then I heard certain writers have done that. And fortunately for some of them, they've had really good artists who save them and make them look good.
Yeah.
And then when I use them later, it's like, well, this guy's crap, It's like, and then I realized, and then I talked to, my wife's a artist, storyboard artist, director, whatever. And so so I get to hear all of those bitches about writing all the time. So I hear them talking about the same writer, and it's like, oh, now it makes sense. So again, there's all these different levels. So everybody's trying to, writers are trying to make this thing foolproof in a way, but at the same time, they don't want to insult the artist or the director either.
Yeah, and the artists don't want to. And the artists don't want to insult the writers most times.
No, I think that the best experiences I've had in the business are when it's a collaboration, when the writers and the artists really truly do kind of work together and trust each other to kind of go in and say, like, hey, Kevin, this is what I'm thinking is, and then you're like, no, like, yeah, you're kind of there, but this is kind of like, I always think that give and take is what makes great shows, and what, and it's fortunate that you don't usually have writers and artists in the same building anymore. We did at Marvel on one of the shows that we were doing there, and it was nice to be able to go over and talk to the people who were. Unfortunately, most of the writers were freelance, but you could talk to the story editors and kind of discuss things. And
it varies on show to show. I mean, I do feel like at Disney, it was kind of open. You could do it, but it wasn't necessarily encouraged. I even remember going to a storyboard artist one time and saying, oh, this is really good. You just make sure you get the timing from the timing director that you want. You should talk to them. And the artist said, we're allowed to talk to them?
Yeah.
This is right there. Just go to lunch with them. So even when I was at Hanna-Barbera, they had everybody separated, so you didn't. So I see somebody wrote something like that. They think it's funny that we're yelling at our coworkers. But there is, or there has been, I don't like it. I like working with the artist. That's very helpful. But there is sometimes the artist versus writer mentality that is almost encouraged by the the executives sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. It's something that you know, there's like a division that's put up walls that are put up artificially
Yeah.
that shouldn't exist. Like they, you know, because it only hurts their product in the end. You know, the
Yeah, it
result
goes
isn't
back
as
to
good.
that. It goes back to the improv thing about yes and that everybody builds on the idea. Some of
Right.
my best originally when I was in Disney, I was told the writers don't talk to the artists and the artists don't talk to the writers, and I thought that was ridiculous. And
Yep.
then fast forward a few years, I'm in. I can't remember the storyboard artists, but I was doing Rescue Rangers, and we were doing a tap dance, and so they knew me, you know, old showgirl. So they had me come in the office, and I was tap dancing for an hour in their room, you know, tap dancing and taking pictures and, you know, getting ready to do a storyboard with dancing. And, you know,
Mhm.
and then I did another one for Rescue Rangers with opera.
Yeah, that's
And
why, like, you know, they came into my office too and asked me to tap dance. I did this whole thing and they said, nah, Dev's much better. And they left.
I was wondering who they were comparing me to. But, you know, and those are some of the best memories because, you know, you're contributing in a different but creative way to an artist, and then it creates this trust. And
Sure.
I love the years before we weren't, you know, shh, don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
I didn't know. It's funny because when I was there, I actually remember, and you know, I'm still friends with him, but some Dave Prince did a board for some script, and I went down to his office and I just said, "Oh wow, this is so cool! I really like this and this." And he goes, and he just stared at me for a while, and then he just went, "You're the first writer that's ever said anything about one of my boards." And I felt like so sad. Like that's just awful.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to work with you, you know, with the writers. I think that
Yeah.
even when you're getting pushback, you know, you're like Deb said, you're building off of things, and I've never seen the result be worse. You know, it's always better when you have that collaborative spirit.
Like if someone talks to you and they come in and say, "What do you mean when?" Like I remember actually, and again, everyone just cop. You know, like I'm thinking, "Oh, this is fine" because everybody else is doing it. So I remember, I don't know, if it was Darkwing Duck or Rescue Rangers or whatever, but there was an expression. Everyone said he gives the person a dry look, you know, and then so he gives a dry look, just sort of like what are you talking about? Is what I took it as to be, and I would write that. And finally, somebody came in and said, "What do you?" I have no idea what this is. I'm like, "How have you been drawing it for all these years if you don't know what it is? Just now you're bringing it up?" It's like,
Yeah, that is a funny. I took, you know, we used to always say he does a take, he does a double take.
Yeah.
You know, we all know that. So I go and I'm working for this company out of Malaysia, but you know, I'm working with Americans, but it's representing. Oh my God, it was the worst thing I ever worked on. Anyways, I would write, you know, he does a take, he does a double take, you know, all that, and the producer comes scream, just she's livid. What the expletive is this take? What is he taking? Where is he taking it? Who is he taking it from? And I was like, you're kidding? You know, you need to write out what they're taking. And okay.
Yes. Well, that was one of the reasons then why, you know, Disney would send a director overseas so that they could interpret the camera notes and work with the crew. Well, also too, because we were on different time schedules. You know, as we were going home, they were just coming into work.
That's, you know, and this whole overseas thing, because I just was working on a show for Sunboy in China, and you know, there is no story editor.
No.
I was the head writer. I don't even know what that means, really. And then there's the issue of you don't really have that interim person, and there's the issue of translation and what's funny. And for instance, this particular people thinks that anything to do with the butt, the derriere,
Yes,
you know, and shaking it is hysterically funny. and 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 then coming to me and saying you need to work in butt shakes. I know this sounds ridiculous, but because that's really funny, and our audiences really love it, and fart jokes and things like that. And it's really interesting as a writer, because in the way the market is so open now, and what you write is playing in so many different countries. And so working at Disney, I felt like we were really writing for a very specific audience.
Yeah.
But now in the shows that I work with, the audience is international. It's very broad. And so now you're trying to find humor and write physical jokes that translate. And so I was doing this show, which I thought I was writing some brilliantly physical, funny things. And they're like, what is this? What is this? Let us help you be a better writer. What's really funny is that the character turns and wiggles their butt towards camera. Oh.
Okay.
Okay. So, it's sometimes, well, a lot of times being a writer now for me, because I've worked on a show out of India recently and a show out of China recently, and then one before that from Malaysia, is learning to write in a way that makes sense to that audience.
Yeah.
And that's been a real challenge. And then we're working with their storyboard artists. So anyways, I just opened up a can of words, but you spend all your life becoming what you think is a really good writer, and then you enter a new world.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the rules are different.
Right. Well, it's cultural. I mean, that's and I always think.
Yeah, and they're translating your dialogue, so you certainly can't use any colloquials. I can't even say it.
We know what you mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's tough. I mean, it's the same thing. Like what Dave was saying about, getting rid of an animation director. I've never understood that it's that why studios would, that seems to be the first thing they get rid of, and it's like, what? Like that would be the last thing I would get rid of. That's the one person who is he's the safety net, or they're the safety net to make sure that they're interpreting things culturally the way it's going to play, that you're not going to get a butt joke in Batman if it's not written in there, or something that's off with that. Like I've never understood that. It's baffling to me why that would be something that would get a job that gets eliminated, or passed on to the head of the animation studio to do. I just don't get it. I don't understand that one.
There's been a lot of things recently in the show that I worked on with Carl. All of a sudden, in the middle of the season, they changed a character, and they inserted that all of a sudden a character could fly. We were like 26 episodes in, and all of a sudden this character can fly, and you go, how did we get here? Who did they not watch? And you're not privy to it. You're not privy to these decisions. You're not asked to join in, and it's so frustrating because so what was great is that because they weren't sequential, we were able to mix up the lineup, and then I figured out a way that we could introduce earlier how this character could fly, so that by the time we got to that episode, it made sense.
Yeah.
It made me start thinking, wait a minute, I've been working on shows with no story editors, and there's no consistency, or I'm just all of a sudden the head writer. Well, I don't even know what that means really. And then, in the show where all of a sudden somebody, I don't know if it was somebody's husband, girlfriend, secretary, I don't know, all of a sudden said, that character should fly. Okay. Without any idea, like, they'll say, oh, hey, your notes are easy. They're easy. And you go, well, wait a minute. Just change this thing in the third act. Well, no. You have to go back to the second act all the way to the setup in the first act to make it work in the third act.
But you also have to go back. If that's a character that's existed for 25 prior episodes, you have to go back and retro that too?
yeah. So sometimes now I'm just really, my mom says you should change the character's costume.
Meaning that's a note you probably could get sometime.
Oh,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, have you ever gotten a thing where a story editor will come back and say, well, you know, my 7-year-old nephew loves this show, but he thought it would be really cool if they could do this, this, and this, you know, and you just kind of go, well, now
I think we had a head of a studio at Animation TV Disney who came into an office and said, "My son likes this." So,
Yep.
Yes, that happens.
Well, or like, or sometimes you get dictated to through the toy company.
Yeah.
yes.
You know, the reason the gargoyles had cars, you know, well, they have wings, they can fly. Yeah, but we sell toy cars. We need cars, you know. So there was the
They have
Gargoyle
a car
movie.
for Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it was the reason why Batman Beyond didn't go beyond, you know, get another season. I was there, you know.
Didn't have a car. So
Well, you know, it was like they wanted the Bruce's design to look like the Hasbro's design, and Bruce is
yeah.
like, no. Make it look like my design.
There's a lot of really interesting, I was working on the Land Before Time sequel, and they said we wanted to have a Thanksgiving theme. I went, we are in the Cretaceous period. There are
They were
really no
thankful for something, though, Dev.
They were thankful that the meteor hadn't hit yet.
Yeah, exactly.
at the time of the Great Giving. It turned out really well, but I'm thinking, where did this come from? And you know, somebody upstairs said, make sure she puts in a Thanksgiving theme.
A very special episode.
Already, you know, I've already been in a draft, and then I've, you know, now I'm, and it's, you know, and it's a film. It's a 75-minute film.
Yeah.
So I'm going back trying to want in a Thanksgiving theme. You know, you just want to go.
But don't forget those checks cash just the same way as the.
Yeah, and you just say, hey, it's, you know, you yes and it, and then
right.
and then they came back. Not only do you want a Thanksgiving theme, but put a fire safety message in there.
Oh.
And tell.
At least they didn't ask you to put in a car.
I was going to say, then the dinosaurs look at the camera and say, "Hey kids, and don't forget to buckle your seatbelts."
And
So,
you know, you scratch your head, but the thing
Yeah.
is again, it really freaking makes you be creative. You know,
So-
again, it's a.
So then I'm wondering, because we all kind of came out of the 65 episode shows.
Yeah.
As a writer and being on staff, so did you ever feel that there was a requirement for the number of episodes that you had to pitch, and how did those pitch sessions, you know, go? You know, how difficult was and how difficult was it to kind of find enough ideas for enough pitches and for enough story ideas to, you know, to keep things going and earn that paycheck?
Well, I have a lot to say, but I'll let Kevin talk because I've been talking too much.
I mean,
Go
I
ahead.
don't recall it. I mean, you pitch a lot. Sometimes you pitch shows and you'll pitch like 5 shows and they'll go, oh, I like 4 of them. Sometimes you pitch 5 shows, I don't like any of them. So you just keep doing it. I think over the years, actually, I don't really, early on, I'm not to say it was easy, but I think at a certain point it got tougher where everybody was so picky. In fact, even on Lion Guard, to me, it was ridiculous that the group would pitch all their stories and we'd have like whatever 5, and then you'd pitch it to the network and then they would go, I like this one. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I would never work for them again, ever. No, it's like, sorry, right? You're going to tell me all these writers came up with, ultimately by the end of the thing, let's just say they did 10 shows. The writers had to pitch 100 shows, really? And the network executive, what was their qualification? Oh, they were the assistant to an executive who got promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Did they study writing in school? Probably not. Did they have any background? Probably not. But they're going to tell you, you know, rhinoceroses, we don't think they're stubborn. What, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
It
that's
can be,
ridiculous.
it can be, when I was probably Tumbleleaf, which was Amazon. I did the first season of Tumbleleaf, was the hardest show uh, I ever pitched, because usually you're taught in animation, because most of these afternoon shows, I don't know the older shows, but they have to have an educational component or some kind of EQ component, emotional quotient. And so you're taught to entertain first, right? Educate second. That
Mhm.
there's some kind of moral story that runs through it, right?
Right.
So on Tumbleleaf, the education was so emphatic that it sort of beat all us writers into submission. The education factor became far more important than the entertainment. So once you got the education factor down, then you tried to make entertainment about it. So uh, it was grueling. It was literally grueling, where we would get together and they brought in specialists and psychologists and they showed us movies of kids learning, picture. Oh,
Who doesn't enjoy doing that?
it was, I mean, I learned a lot. I really learned. I could be a
That's
child psychologist right now, just, but
Well,
it
listen,
was, and the show ended up to be fantastic and they got all kinds of Emmys and they went on, but they left writers in the, in the wake, because we just got so worn out. It was really hard. And I started to, wonder if I lost it.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that, it's great that you say that stuff and you're so open about that, because I think a lot of artists, can relate to that process. If you've been in the business long enough, I think everybody goes through that roller coaster of, the career. And, I don't think everybody's career is just like, woo. I think it's like, woo, woo,
I don't know about Kevin, but I feel like I'm constantly starting over again,
Mm,
constantly.
mm.
And I've been personally doing a lot more live action now than I have been animation. And it's a bit of a tug of war for me, where I put my energy. But bottom line, writing is writing. And I think it's really important for writers to constantly challenge themselves. And a show like Tumbleleaf brought me to my knees and really made me look at myself as an artist or as a writer. And kind of go through a dark night of the soul. Like, did I lose it? Am I talented anymore? Do I not know how to do this? And I think it's important to examine yourself.
mhm.
Yeah.
And then we call each other, and we we prop each other back up again.
Yeah.
It's like, go get them.
Yep.
I do call David a lot, and he calls me. Well,
Yep.
oh, can I say that? And we whine.
But that's good. That's a good, you need that support. I think it's an important thing.
Just talking it through. And
Well, I mean, this is going to be, there's a lot of newer artists who are kind of sitting here, and people that, and I think it's important that they understand that, like, the struggle, there's a struggle of getting in, but it's not, it's not just like, oh, I've made it. And it's,
Right.
but the good thing is, though, is that everybody goes through this. Like, I think that it's nice to know in some ways that you're not the only person who doubts themselves, or, that everybody does, no matter, even the guys that you think are the, like, how could he doubt himself? He's amazing, or
I
she's
think the one
amazing.
thing is like that Dev is saying is some people will end up just doing one type of show. So they don't really reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
And those people just aren't going to get that work. I mean, or they might get lucky and jump all over. But I'm sure both Dev and I we've seen a lot of our colleagues just drop out because they couldn't. And so if you choose to try to do different things, which I would encourage everybody to do, unless you're just really lucky. It's like, I've been lucky. Like because I like to write more than I like to story edit or produce, it was really easy for me once I was producing. In fact, I was producing at Disney, and I didn't want to do it so much that I made a deal at Warner Brothers saying, like, I'll come over there, but only if it's guaranteed that I don't have to story edit or produce, you know. And they made me a great deal. They matched my salary of producing salary for writing, and just and said, only like if we really need you, would you story edit? And I said, oh, okay, but I really don't want to. And when they did ask me to story edit, I said, I really don't want to. And they said, okay, you can be head writer. But they had a story editor, so that was fine.
So they get you to be a head writer and make you do the work, and then they don't pay you.
But what I was going to say is, like, I think it's good to be able to know, like, whether you're an artist or a writer. So, like, if you're an artist, you're going to be a storyboard artist, a director, a producer. Maybe then you're going to be a director. Maybe then you're going to be a story editor. And then you're going to work on a preschool. Then you're going to work on a regular comedy. Then you're going to work on and it's like the more flexibility you have, the longer you're going to be in the business. And I think even though sometimes you're going to beat your head against the wall, you're not going to find yourself that's the other reason I left Disney after being there for 8 years was I felt I was repeating my jokes, becoming sort of in a rut. So I think bouncing around from preschool to comedy to 22 minutes to 11 minutes, story editor, producer, writer, keeps you fresh. Even though you may have some bumps on your head from beating it against the wall, I think it's good. It's good for longevity. And the other thing is that Deb brought up is, and I did the same thing. I took improv, I took storyboard classes, you know, acting classes, none of which I'm good at, but it's all been help, you know.
You understand it, but you have some understanding of what you have an empathy for what's going on, which I think is wonderful. That's what everybody should do. They should like, I think you gave like priceless advice. It's exactly what I say to my students all the time. Like, you push yourself. If you don't just do comedy storyboarding, do action storyboarding if you can. Like, challenge yourself, push yourself, because if you only lock into one thing, then your career is probably going to be short, and it's probably not going to be as long. And I don't think ultimately, I think they feed off of each other, because the skills that you learn being a comedy storyboard person can translate some of that into the action. Like, it makes you better. Like, the process makes you better because you're challenging yourself and you're not just staying stagnant with what you're doing. And you know, I'm really glad that you said that as a writer, because artists have to do the same thing. Like, we have to go through and we should study writing, and we should study, acting, and like, it's all the process. Like, the more that you're involved and the more you understand these things, you may not be the greatest writer, but it doesn't matter, because you attempted the process, you understand and have more empathy for it and what you're going through. And like, it's great to kind of come from that
Right.
perspective.
But I think as a storyboard artist, knowing story structure, knowing what the characters need to do, why they're there, and to be able to kind of dig in and see where the story is going.
Yeah.
I just think you make better cinematic choices,
Yep.
because you really are then partnering up with the writer to fulfill their image and use your talents to really take it across the finish line and really make something worth looking at.
Yeah,
it is a team sport.
Yes.
It is a team sport. And I think the sooner people, new talent, everybody gets that in their head, that it's a team sport, the better that you will do in the more influences. And, I just want to say that my husband worked in the film industry in the early days where people did everything. You did everything. Yeah. If it needed to be done on a set, you did it. And then I'm teaching at a film school. I was teaching screenwriting at a film school for a couple of years, and then I taught in Asia for a couple of years too. And I saw the same thing, that they're teaching everybody does their thing in their department. And you don't touch anything in somebody else's department. And so they're all so compartmentalized. They really don't understand what the other people are doing. And I just don't think that that's the way to run a show.
No.
I worked in 3 different film schools teaching writing, and I thought, my God, I don't get this. Why are they doing this? Everybody should learn everything.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm hoping that it goes now that we have a lot more independent films happening and stuff, that it goes back to that, because you really need to know what everybody does and you need to respect it.
Well, you know, when I teach, I always teach for storyboarding. I teach why. Why are you doing that shot? Why are you doing that camera move? What emotion are you going for? That's the most important thing, because without that, without understanding or knowing why you're doing something, you're just fumbling through the weeds. And yeah, you may hit on great shots, you may hit on, you know, but if you're not asking yourself constantly, why am I doing this? Or what is trying to understand, like the biggest thing is sitting down and really taking your words in script and trying to, you know, come up with, okay, this is the intent, because the subtext is between the lines and between the words.
Exactly.
It's what you're saying. And those are always the things that I always tell my students, like, you have to read that script 10 times sometimes to really understand, until you understand what the writer's going for and what the intent is, because it's not always crystal clear in the, you know, there's subtext that has to be, I'm telling you, you're the ones that are writing it, but it's such an important process that visually we have to make sure that we're honoring what you're doing, and that we're making sure that you're, you know, all your hard work is being recognized visually. And that's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process. And you have to really dedicate yourself to finding intent and finding the why and the, you know, and the emotion in scenes. And, you know, that to me is like the biggest, I think a lot of times, a lot of people tend to get more hung up in, you know, I can do this really cool sequence of whatever, but then they give short shrift to the most important element of it, which is the emotional aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a process that, you know, I think the best writers and the best artists are the ones that can get you there and do it effectively. Because if I don't feel something, you can have the greatest action sequence or comedy, whatever, you know, Rube Goldberg sequence in the world, but if it doesn't pay off with an emotion, it'll make you feel something. It's kind of, yeah, okay, you know. So
Right.
it's, you know, to me, I think that's like, I think that it's good that, you know, I think it's why I do this, and I think it's why Dave likes doing this. And, you know, I think there's a part of, like, when you teach, you want to kind of convey that knowledge that you have, so other people learn what you've gained in 30 years or 25 years of working in the business, and that experience and the things that you figure out
Yeah.
as you're going on.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
I think it's true. I think a lot of people do stuff, even from production assistants on up. They don't know why they do it. That's just their job. They're just supposed to do it. That's what they do. They don't ask, why are we doing this? I can't help but think, like, even I see writers write a joke and you go, this is not funny, but they saw it before, but they saw it out of context. Like, for instance, everybody's probably seen Donald Duck get his butt stuck in a jar and he tries to shake it up, and that's funny. Somebody else might look at that and go, oh, I see what's funny about that. He's shaking his butt. That's funny. It's like, that's not what's funny. But now you're going to get somebody telling you that's funny. You know, or I had some people writing in scripts shouting all the time. And I said, what's so funny about shouting? It's like, well, I see it in a show. So I go, yeah, but they were probably shouting a punchline to a joke or something. It wasn't the shouting part that was good. Or like, you know, so you have to ask why. And the other thing is, like, people don't come to you and say, I don't understand this. That's a perfectly good question. But I don't think people do it enough. So they just go, I don't understand. I'll just do it anyway.
They try to interpret it. They try to interpret what it is. Yeah, that's always the worst feeling in the world, when you're kind of flying blind and you don't feel the confidence to go up to somebody and say, I don't understand. Right, I don't understand this. And the thing that I've learned in my career is that it's much easier to go up to you and say, Kevin, I don't understand. Like, what are you looking for here in this scene, rather than just trying to interpret it and you go, what the hell is this? So,
well, that's also teamwork.
Yeah.
And as opposed to just, I'm just going to push through. It doesn't make any difference. I'll just do something, you know, because then you just wind up having, you know, scribbles in a box, you know, or scribbles on a page, and that's no, it doesn't mean anything.
Getting a ton of questions, Dave. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say
before everybody has to leave
here before we wrap up. Let's see, where was that? There was one from. Okay, here. When writing for an ensemble cast, how do you keep the individual personalities in the dialogue and reactions in the script? How you do that?
Well, that's a really good question, because in a lot of shows that I head writered, you know, I'll see, you could take the name of the character off and then you wouldn't even know who was saying what. So that's when intention, when you go back to the Bible, every character has a personality. Every character, you know, they're not one-dimensional, they're three-dimensional. And they have feelings, and they have likes, and they have strengths, and they have weaknesses. And the way they talk has a cadence. And so it's your job as a writer to capture their cadence or their personality within your dialogue. That's your job. And you know, that's where your craft comes in. That's where you have to understand that you're just not writing a preschool show where everybody talks alike. Hey, that's fun. Let's go play. You know, you have to find within your writing a unique way that each character would say that, and that's your job.
And it sometimes helps. I mean, for instance, this sounds stupid, and I actually didn't ever think of this before, but my first show that I worked on animation was the Smurfs. So it pretty much helped that everybody had an attitude.
Yeah.
Vanity, you know, you're vain. So it helps if your characters have a quirk to them. So you can at least write that. Like, I'm writing a show now, and one of the characters is big on sports. So when I give her that person a line, if I can, it does, you know, sometimes it's just a regular line. I also find it bad that every single line is quirky. That doesn't seem real to me. So sometimes people can just say, "How are you?" That's fine, you know. But if every so often you can slip something in that fits that personality, that helps. The other thing that helps,
know, Kurosawa, I show a video to my class about Kurosawa, and he told his actors to have a physical affectation. He always told them, so if you watch Mifune and, you know, Seven Samurai, he kind of kept going behind his back with his arm and kind of, you know, like a war injury or something, that he was kind of, you know, he was stiff, and he was, so it was just something that you would recognize the character at certain times, just visually by something that they would do.
Yeah.
So, you know, the artist can help with those kinds of things as well, for sure.
I was going to say, the voice, I see somebody here wrote something about Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, which I actually would story edited the first season. And I don't remember, but it's like, I'm sure it helped that the characters had quirks to them. But the other thing to give credit to is, once the voice actors come in and start doing it, it's so much easier than to start writing, because now I have a voice. I mean, I have to say, like, I wrote Darkwing Duck, you know, and then story edited on it. But when I first wrote Darkwing Duck, we were writing not knowing what he sounded like. So when I first heard Darkwing Duck, it's like, oh, that's not right at all. You know, that is not it. And then after a couple of scripts, it's like, oh no, that's perfect. But yeah, you're kind of faking it at first. I think the voice you hear in your head is probably not going to be what it ends up at.
And because I come from an acting background, when I read my scripts, man, I'm doing all the characters. I'm giving them my own, you know,
interpretation
and stuff like that. And then I always think that what I've come up with is way better than who they cast, but you know, they didn't ask.
So we have another question here that says, what are some specific things that you have to learn in writing for animation versus writing for live action? I guess, this is a follow-up to that. Do you know of any specific books that maybe would address some of these things that you could recommend?
That address the difference between live action and
Well, just the difference between live action and animation, just from your own point of view, and then just I piggybacked on that. Just some writing books that maybe you have kind of leaned into that might be live action, where you've picked some things out that applies to animation, or you know, or just worth recommending and reading.
I've been going back and forth a lot. I just did I just was hired to do 2 pilots, live action pilots, and well, not just, but you know, they're all disciplines. I mean, it's just a matter of, you know, you know, if you want to learn how to write for screen, well, number one, there's a number of great screenplay writing books. And I think The Hero's Journey is, you know, by Christopher Vogler is just a really great one. And it's the one that Disney, you know, introduced me to, and I'm just reading now. I'm reading the new edition, which is great. I'm also reading The Heroine's Journey, which is really interesting. Save the Cat is always great if you know, you just want to clean up your screenplay. But the thing is that, you know, the difference is just the difference between writing for a sitcom, writing for a feature film, a drama, you know, writing an action adventure. Writing is writing, but you have to learn, like if you write for a sitcom, it's hyper reality. Everything is, you know, it's just a hyper reality. So you have to bathe yourself in that reality. I just wrote a pilot that hope it sells. That's, you know, it's hardcore. It's based on history. It's a lot of killing, a lot of raping. It's pillaging. It's pretty intense. So what did I do? I immersed myself in screenplays, reading screenplays of that ilk to get myself into it. And then, you know, and then when I go back to animation, I'll go back and I'll read animation scripts and I'll get myself back into that world. So it's just inculcating yourself into that world, because writing is writing. Structure is still structure, whether you're doing animation, television, or, you know, feature films.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's no real book you can read on it. You just have to do your homework, read the scripts, read animation scripts, read.
I would agree. I would say if you just want to pick a general thing, the biggest difference that would probably, just looking at too, is that you do more direction in
Right. That's the big difference.
animation.
Yeah.
So, but even, you know, when I do start any new show, I mean, sometimes you can't get this because you're at the beginning of the show. They don't have anything. So maybe you could talk to the producer and say, what shows do you like or whatever. Right. But if I'm on a show and I'm lucky enough that they have at least a pilot or something, I want to see that script, and I'm going to take a red pen and I'm going to circle a lot of stuff. Like, okay, when they do sound effects, do they capitalize the sound effects or they put it in brackets? Do they use a lot of exclamation points? Do they italicize stuff, or they whatever? So I feel like for writing, when I taught some classes at UCLA, and it's like, my thing would be like, okay, so it's subjective of your storytelling sense and how good your dialogue is. But the one thing that you shouldn't screw up is the format.
Yeah.
Like, so study that, because if I get a script, I flip through it and I see like a page with no action scenes, it's like, I already know I'm in trouble. You know, or if I see something where everybody has a speech and then an action, a speech and an action, it's like, I'm in trouble. It's like, so at the very least, get the format down. Yeah. And then at least I look at it and I go, well, okay. Because it seems funny, but as a story editor, if the writer gives me the right format and I change every single word, but the structure is there, I'm fine.
Right.
You know, but if it's all over the place, it's like, you didn't get the format. It's like, okay, that's like, you know, and get the spelling right and all of that, because people's like, oh, big deal, I made it. But it's like, you know, I read the first few pages, it's like, I know how it's going to turn out, you know?
Yeah.
I really want to second that about what Kevin said too, about knowing the format, because I've worked with a lot of, you know, people who want to be writers and stuff, and they'll give me screenplays that I go, this looks like a book. Oh no, it's a screenplay. Did you read screenplays? No, but I watch movies. Did you read, have you read a screenplay? You know, this is, I feel like I'm reading a novel here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what I found, and then when it started happening a lot, I realized, gosh, they're not reading scripts. They're not, you know, the way that I worked for, the way I learned to really write screenplays initially was before I started at Disney. I was working for Jane Fonda Films, and I was a reader. I was a script analyst, and I read 20 scripts a week. And that's how I learned how to write a screenplay, by reading 20.
And it's the same
scripts.
here. It's like before I started writing sitcoms, I worked as a production assistant or whatever at Paramount, and I would go into those days, there was like a Xerox department, and I would go in there to Xerox the show, whatever we were doing. And I made friends with the guys in the Xerox department, and they would always be giving me the latest script that, you know, under the table, because all the guys in the Xerox department wanted to be writers as well. So we were always reading, and learning that way. When I got my first job in animation, I didn't even think about animation as a writing thing. And when I went in, the first thing I did was I bought every book I could buy in animation. I went back and watched all the old Warner. I bought every DVD, or actually in those days it was
the laser
tape. You know, I watched everything I could watch and studied it. So, and it's ongoing. Like it's Dev's the same way I am. It's like I'm constantly reading books on playwriting or rereading books or taking master classes or taking online classes. And I mean, part of it's just I enjoy that. So there's that, but I guarantee you that keeps it going for you.
Sure.
Yeah, it keeps you fresh.
That, you know, animation, most people watch animation at home anymore. And without necessarily watching it with an audience. And so it seems that, you know, a lot of cases, or at least with the better animation shows, that they are character driven. The best ones will be character driven somehow. You know, with sitcom, Kevin, you know, like especially when you worked Norman Lear, that the approach was almost like playwriting, because you were shooting in front of a live audience, and so you got that immediate response.
Right.
And so the jokes had, you know, the rhythm of the jokes almost had to be like plays. You didn't want the audience to sit too long without a punchline to react to. And then in hopes that, you know, if anybody's ever been to a taping of a sitcom, and you know that, you know, that half hour takes like 3 hours to shoot,
at least
they might shoot the same scene 5 times, and you're praying that the audience is still laughing on take 5 as they did on take 1. I think, you know, what you say is that you really have to know what you're writing for, and really get your head in that headspace, and really see how that particular piece of writing, how it works, how the writers make it work.
I see somebody wrote a thing about, you know, comic books and animation. It's like same thing. I was writing, and then I wanted to write a comic book, and somehow I got in touch to do a Justice League comic was the first one I wrote for somebody. But it was like I read comic books when I was younger, pretty much like Dev. I wasn't like a fan. I wasn't like a comic collector.
Yeah.
I started buying all the comic books once I got into this animation. But I read them, but I read them more for just not for the style of writing a comic, but just for the stories and stuff. But then when I had to go and write a comic, now I'm reading the comics going, oh, this is much different. You know, like every page, I got to have some, you know. And so then if somebody if someone gives you a note on a comic, it's like it really messes you up, because you have to fix it. You only have so many panels on that page, and then so it's totally different. But it's basically the same thing. It's that Deb says. It's like you read all the books and stuff like that, but then study whichever you're gonna do, and that genre, and that particular producer, whoever you're doing. I mean, it gets specific, you know, more and more.
Sure. Well, you either, you know, you read all the books, you read the comics, you watch the movies.
Yeah.
But the most important thing then is to write. You just have to keep writing, and it becomes, you know, it becomes more obvious to you what it is, and you develop your ear, you know, and your sense. So like, because what I was going to say earlier was that you guys wrote so many scripts that just instinctively you knew, as you were breaking down the story and getting it on paper, you knew approximately how many beats of this and that and the other thing you had to get in there, and but by the time you hit the last one, you had about 22 minutes. You know, give or take, you had it, and that's the same thing I think with writing
I think I
screenplays
finally get there.
or writing comics, is that, you know, instinctively, after a while, you just have that sense. I mean, I joke that, you know, when I was directing animation, if a storyboard artist handed me a storyboard, an act, because he used to, you know, they used to break the half hour into 3 artists, and each artist would work on 6.5 minutes. So I knew how many pages, if the artist did their job, how many pages was 6.5 minutes. And I could kind of put that thing in my hand and just kind of,
Yeah.
and I could feel,
You knew if it was light.
I know whether the board artist had done it.
Oh yeah, I think I remember you doing that at Epoch. I think I remember you taking a board and you're like, yep. I think you remember. I think I remember you saying that.
I did that at Sony. I was directing Jumanji, and one of my board artists who should have known better brought, you know, he just kind of blew through it, and I just kind of went, when it came in, I go, wow, this feels a little light, and I kind of gave it the old hand test. I go, oh, I got my work set ahead of me here. Somebody wrote here the difference between writing a script for comic book and writing a script for animation.
Well, that's what Kevin just that's what he.
Yeah,
just...
and what I was going to say is that because it was one of the things that I kind of talk to my classes about, is that if you learn how to write a really good beat outline, that's going to help you write comics, because then
That's a good point. Yeah.
You can look at the beats and you can figure out, okay, how many of these will work on a page. You develop your cinematic mind's eye, and figure out, you know, the flow. And the other thing you have to understand too is that when you write an animation script, you know, you're writing for something that's actually going to move. So, you know, as a board artist and as a writer, you know that if there's something that's really nuanced, you can really break it down, and the writer, if it's something really important, can really break it down on the page, and the board artist can really break it down in the acting. But when you're doing comics, you know, you've got maybe seven good-sized panels. I mean, you can always go smaller if you want to break things down into micro minutes. But what you have to do is you have to really figure out the exact moment that you're going to depict in that panel, because when the comic book reader reads that page, they're going to fill in what they're not seeing.
That was the hardest transition for me.
Yeah, and the action, and so I always say, you know, with comics, is think about the action that's happening in the gutters between the panels, to help you figure out what's going to go, what will smoothly go from panel to panel, so that it still feels like there's a continuity, but the reader can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I mean, when I came to Epoch, Dave, I came from, you know, I had my own book at Image. I was working on Iron Man and War Machine. So I figured out the storyboarding stuff. How hard can that be? So, you know, and you know, that was like the thing that I really struggled with, was the nuance, because it was like I could hit really nice layout, but and get that moment. But then it was like everything, the nuance was the stuff that I had no clue how to get to. You know, that was the hardest thing to figure out, was how to do that. And that was hard for me. That was a really hard thing for me to kind of get to that.
You kind of, you know, when you're first starting out there, the translation of the script into storyboard is, because you're working in panels, it's like you're doing a comic strip.
Yeah.
And you forget that this thing is going to move, and it's like a movie. It's not.
Especially today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially today.
Well, I think we've, as my friend Howard Stern says, we've learned a lot today.
We certainly have. Yes. I didn't know you were friends with him. That's good. Get him on next episode.
Yeah, he'll be next week.
Okay,
yes.
Good.
Yes. In fact, I pitched years ago when Howard was at WNBC. He just made an off-the-cuff remark about doing a comic book, and
Art man.
Well, I don't know if it was compartment, but I did a bunch of model sheets for the cast, and we talked about it, but it never came to be.
Well, I want to say I want to say thank you to Dev and to Kevin. Thank you so much for
Dev and Kev, the team.
Thank you. I don't know you, so thank you so much for doing this for us. It was I'm sure everybody here will tell you how awesome you guys were. So thank you.
If we haven't discouraged everybody from
Then we haven't done our job. Okay. No, Dev, Kevin, is great. Well, it's good seeing you because I usually talk to you on the phone or via email. So it's nice to see faces.
Fabulous.
Kevin, you are as lovely as ever. Dev, I love you. This has been really great. I hope we kind of, blew away some of the mystique of writing for animation, and we couldn't ask for two better guests to help us do
not
that.
At all. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so
open. Thank you.
You guys.
All right, so we will. I'll be talking to you guys at some point in time. And David, as always, it's fun being with you.
Yes,
and,
sir. Same here.
I hope everybody enjoyed it, and be on the lookout. We're gonna follow up. The next installment will probably be about storyboarding and character design and prop design and background. The next step, once the script is done, where it goes and how it gets. It gets.
Seeing you, Kevin.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Deb. Bye, Deb.
Guys. Nice meeting y'all.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Peace out.
All right, Dave. So yes, we will. So since everybody's left now, we can talk about the next episode before everybody leaves. So yeah, the next exciting installment of this will probably, I don't know if it would be boards or it would be character and background. We'll have to kind of figure that one out.
Well, I think we'll go do with design, and if it leans into storyboard, we'll at least get started with it, and then.
Yeah, I think we'll do design next. I think people would like to know about character design and background design a little bit. So
and how it generates out of those scripts.
Yeah.
After everything that you've learned about the writing, how the next step, the designers take that information and begin to interpret it and turn it into a model pack and find a style for the show. And we'll go from there and see.
Yeah. So the next episode, Dave and I are your directors. So we'll sit down and kind of talk about the process too, about how, like, as a director, when you're in there, if you're lucky enough to be involved as a director with the with character design and background design, that's a major thing. So to take that script and be able to interpret it, visually in backgrounds and character design, it's a big deal. So I look forward to that, my friend. It'll be nice to. These are always fun, and these are always super informative. I learn as much as everybody else doing this
absolutely.
stuff. So, all right. We'll stay safe in Ohio, and we'll see you in a week or two. So
okay,
we'll
and.
get our